Hello and welcome to Reality Ready. My name is Armando Saucedo, the online editor for The Connection. Joining me is Kyle Smith, the president of Project Playhem, the video game club at Schoolcraft. We have a very special guest today. He was a lead animator for Infinity Ward, which develops the massive franchise Call of Duty, where he worked on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Ghosts, and Infinite Warfare. He's worked alongside Industrial Light and Magic at Walt Disney Imagineering on the interactive ride Millennium Falcon Smugglers Run at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. He also worked with Niantic, which worked on the popular mobile game Pokemon Go. What an impressive career. He now works at Raven Software as an animator, once again working for the Call of Duty franchise. Say hello to Mark DeRidder.
That's it. You nailed it.
Awesome. So tell us a little about yourself, Mark.
Gosh, well, yes, I'm a video game animator. I think it's what's funny about that is though, I desperately tried not to be a video game animator. So my path into this job is it's a bit of a story, so I'll try and keep it brief. My initial first love of animation was when I saw Jurassic Park at 13, and it was 1993. It was that movie that changed my life. I saw the coolest shots in that. Movie, I found out were 3D animated, and 3D animation was just coming on the scene at the time. It was the perfect time in my development, in my life, to get passionate and fascinated about animation. And of course, Pixar, they come out with all their stuff. And going into college in the late 90s, I went to the College for Creative Studies in the late 90s, early 2000s. Feature film animation, 3D animation was just in its stride. And to me, it was the sort of the height of the craft of animation, and I was just in love with it, and it was desperate to get a job at those big studios like Industrial Light and Magic, like Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney. I love playing games, absolutely love playing video games, and some of the games, there's some impressive animation. I felt like in the early 2000s, video game animation was sort of low quality. A lot of the work seemed to be motion capture cleanup and would lack creativity and artistic expression. And so I kind of just turned my nose up at it, kind of pompously, to the point actually where when I came out of college at a four-year art school, I did animation and digital media. I made a nice, I was proud of it, a 7-minute short film called The Legend of Farmer Jenkins. I was sharing it with studios at Seagraph, and Rockstar saw it, and Rockstar Games does Grand Theft Auto. This is 2003. And they flew me out to San Diego. I got to meet the team. I saw the project they're working on. They offered me the job, and I said no, because I didn't want to be typecast as a video game animator. I thought that would be hard for me to achieve my ultimate dream, which I was super passionate about. So I said no, and I went back to working at a small shop in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan called Armstrong White. It's a really awesome opportunity coming out of college for me, but it was all automotive advertising. It was making photorealistic images of cars and maybe animating them briefly, but a lot more modeling than animating, and it just wasn't entertainment. I wanted to be an entertainment. So every year I would apply to these big shops, and I'd get nothing back, or it would say, thanks but no thanks, or we'll let you know if we need you. All that nice way of saying get lost, and that sucked. Every year I would have a new thing I would put on the reel. Most of it was car stuff though, and student stuff. And so being in Detroit, I had absolutely zero connection to the industry. It was very hard to make that leap from Detroit to the entertainment industry, which is mostly California. So I decided to go back to school, and I did Animation Mentor, which, if people don't know who Animation Mentor is, it's an 18-month online animation training where you're taught by industry professionals. I thought, now I'm going to be able to get to know people from Pixar, DreamWorks, Industrial Light and Magic, and all these spots that I keep naming. And so the funny thing was, right off the bat, my first mentor, I was very bummed to find out it was an animator, video game animator from Texas. The neat thing that happened in this initial class was, we're taught online. This gentleman was working at Terminal Reality, and he was sharing his screen with us. It's to sort of share his screen while he showed us some of his animation tricks, but he minimized his program, and I saw in his background image a Ghostbusters logo. And I am a massive Ghostbusters fan. And I was really excited to know that a Ghostbusters game was being made. This is 2008. I thought I heard somewhere that it was being made in Texas, and for some reason it didn't click until I saw his background image. And so right after class, I reached out to him and I said, hey man, I saw the Ghostbusters logo. I think Ghostbusters is being made in Texas. Are you working on Ghostbusters? If you are, I would love to help out any possible way, whether it's animating or whether it's modeling. At the time I was doing more modeling in the automotive advertising industry. I thought that might be my way in. And he just said, yeah, man, awesome, thanks. I'll let you know, which again, felt like another way of saying get lost. But that excited me. A few months go by and he reached out again. The Ghostbusters production, the Ghostbusters game in 2008 by Atari, the production hit an inevitable point in most productions where we hit crunch mode. I think most people who want to get into this work kind of know what crunch mode is now. It's nothing to be proud of. It's a really rough spot in your life and your production where you work longer hours. There's a lot to be said about that. But it also is your opportunity, if you're trying to get a foot in the door, to strike. And he said, hey, we're in crunch now. I have a number of shots I can't finish. Would you be interested in doing a handful of Ghostbusters cinematic shots? And oh my God, I was just over the moon. Of course, I would love to do this. And it was going to be difficult because I was working full-time at Armstrong White. I was in the middle of Animation Mentor, trying to put my best work out there for that. I was working remotely in Michigan, which I thought was really rad, especially for mid to late 2000s, to have a piece of work like this in Detroit blew my mind. And here I was animating, these wonderful likenesses of the main characters of Ghostbusters, animating Ray Stantz to Dan Aykroyd's voice. I thought I peaked. So I was very happy. And once that project was launched, I could finally put that work on my demo reel. It's hard for students, and we can talk more about that later, of just getting that first break. Because it's a leap of faith for a studio to take on a student. Oftentimes you really have to prove yourself, which is why connections help. So Paul was my connection. Ghostbusters was my legitimate opportunity on my reel. And I thought, all right, I still want to do film. I don't really want to make a career in games at this point. What I'll do is I'll open my search up to game studios and see if anything hits there, and then maybe I'll relocate through that job to the West Coast and start looking around for other opportunities once I hit the ground. And I applied to 3 game studios along with my long list of film houses, and all the game studios wanted me to do tests for them, which is common. That's your first step towards a job in the game industry, is to do a test often, and it's a way for them to weed people out. And all these tests, this is great, but all these tests hit at once. I focused mostly on the Infinity Ward test because it appealed to me. It just what I needed to do for the test. And I think I have the test on my YouTube page too. The soldier running and diving into a corner and then coming out of cover and getting shot and killed. It needed to look very, very realistic. That got me the job at Infinity Ward, and that relocated my family out to LA. When I got to LA finally, the project was Modern Warfare 3. It was halfway through production. It was a rough production. There was a whole batch of new blood coming into the studio, and I was part of that new batch of blood coming in. And so there was a lot of excitement because of that, which I think is neat. And the franchise itself was hitting a peak, so it was a very exciting time to come in. I went from a small retouching house essentially in Detroit. They do great work. I'm not diminishing that at all, but it was small, to a studio of creative people that was like 130 people. I was on a team of 6 animators, I think, and all really talented folks. And I was having the time of my life. I animated a few weapons on that game. I animated several cutscenes on that game, and I was surprised to find out that I enjoyed the work. I did very little motion capture cleanup, and so Modern Warfare 3 launches. It's been almost a year now. I was sort of thinking about how I was feeling coming into this whole thing. Do I want to leave or not? But MW3 was huge. I felt not only just like an animator, but I felt like that you're in a game studio as an animator. You're really a game developer. And so that was really neat. I found I had a lot more say as a game, not on that project because we were trying to finish it. I couldn't come in and make a lot of moves on things. I did a little bit, but not too much. But you still had that legitimacy as a game developer, and you had a say beyond the animation as far as the gameplay and how the story goes, how the characters developed, all this stuff that I had no idea about. And I realized, okay, I want to stick around. I want to be on this project. I want to be on a game project from the beginning to the end, not coming in to finish, but I want to be from the start to the end. So the next project was Ghosts. And on Ghosts, I got more opportunity to flex my keyframe chops, and that was a great experience for me. And so much so that, and particularly focusing on increasing the level of quality in the weapons, that I was promoted to lead animator of weapons. I found it was fascinating to me just how much that low bar of quality I felt about game animation. Instead of looking down upon it as this negative, it was an opportunity, and it was a big mind shift for me. I realized that it's really awesome to innovate. There was such a long way to go for animation technology, and so we developed systems and made the weapons feel more organic yet still responsive. And that play was interesting. It was an interesting area to be as an animator, a little bit technical, a little bit creative. To try and create weapons that felt awesome, right? We always want you to feel like a badass, but we want them also the weapons to have a character. We want the weapons to have a weight to them. And that was missing a lot in first-person shooters in the early 2010s. And I felt one of the contributions, I mean, that wasn't just our studio, it was happening in the industry, but you're starting to see weapons get a much more serious look, as that's the main character of these games, is these weapons, first-person weapons. And so to be in that position was fascinating. So looking back on it, you know, I wanted to be a film animator. I realized what I was trying to do was get into a place where the craft was at the top. I mean, Disney's been doing this for 100 years, and it's a big struggle to sort of try and, you know, get close to reaching the mastery of that. Whereas in game animation, there's a lot of work that can be done to lift things up and innovate, and I find a lot of joy in that. And instead of focusing on cinematic work, which is more film-like, I found myself gravitating towards the gameplay side of things, and making people feel like awesome with a controller in their hands, and that it feels great. That, I think, I ended up finding where I needed to be ultimately, but it was a long way to get there. So that's a long answer, but that is as short as I can make that answer.
You talked about this in your life story a little bit, but what are the different types of jobs for animators in not only in the video game industry, but like in movies and stuff?
Right. Okay. That's a good question. And for me, I've in my career, you know, I've been working in advertising. That was the automotive advertising. So there is, aside from the entertainment, which gives you games, movies, and TV, those are obvious. Advertising has a lot of opportunity for animators. And I did automotive. The automotive space has a lot of opportunity, and we did a lot of website animations, which doesn't sound sexy, but a lot of it was, you know, mini commercials for the web. So something you would see on a broadcast commercial, it was just done for the web, as well as like flying through the car and showing how the car features its safety features, but doing so in a way for customers to, you know, get excited about it. There's also training. A lot of animators can get into training, so education, and so how to actually operate some machinery or whatever. A lot of work can be done there, especially in Detroit. There's I think opportunity there for that. Theme parks too. So that's something that's neat that's happening. I don't know if I mentioned this in my intro. When I left Infinity Ward, I worked at Walt Disney Imagineering for about a year and a half. I worked, and you mentioned it in the intro, that's right. That was an amazing opportunity. That was a dream come true for me. And you wouldn't think animation outside of animatronics for a theme park, but the technologies that are coming out today with virtual reality and huge processing power and real-time graphics, the opportunities for an animator are exploding right now. And in this particular opportunity, I worked on the Millennium Falcon ride for Disneyland and Disney World. And I got to work at Imagineering, which is a dream come true. I've always been a Disney fan. I love the parks. And Imagineering, to me, was this amazing place where unbelievably creative new things happen. And that's what this was. It was a creative new thing that we'd never seen before. I was working with a small team of game developers they brought in, because it's real-time gaming, working with Unreal. So Epic was involved in this as well, and giving us, as much power from the Unreal engine that we could get. Just the tech that went into that was absolutely wild. And then on the creative side of it, we had to make it look as close to film quality as possible, and working with Industrial Light and Magic. So that was an opportunity I didn't think I'd ever get to have. I mentioned how I wanted to work for ILM, and here now I was working with ILM. I thought that ship had sailed, but I heard from a friend of mine who was working for what is now Niantic. I had a friend who I worked at Infinity Ward. He was now there, and he said, "Hey, Mark, we're working on something I think you might like." And that pulled me away from Infinity Ward and working at Imagineering, which is very close to where I was living in LA. So I shortened my commute and working at the campus on a Star Wars ride. I'm a huge Star Wars fan too, like most people in the world. Working with Industrial Light and Magic. They were on conference call with us because they were in San Francisco, but it was an awesome experience. I can go on and on about that, but your initial question was, what can animators do? And my point I'm trying to make is, emerging technology is making more opportunity. And there's virtual production now for films, more in the pre-production end. I think The Mandalorian is being done with real-time backdrops using Unreal. So not just more opportunity for animators, but really maybe specifically game animators like myself who have knowledge of real-time systems and gameplay and making a creature path with AI around an environment that really you're shooting for film that might then get cleaned up. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on right now that's really interesting. And people need animators left and right to make this stuff happen. Someone who knows how to make something move in a realistic way.
Since the quarantine lockdown, are you doing your work from home now?
We are. And this is actually interesting. Well, obviously, it goes without saying, this pandemic is very sad and difficult for a lot of people. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to continue working during this time. But it's a bit remarkable because for a long time, especially working as an animator or any sort of artist in the game industry, I've always had this dream of working remotely, or not just outside of LA. LA is a great place to work. I mean, the work that you can do there is incredible. The best stuff, the most exciting stuff, in my mind, is being done there. But it's a difficult place to live, especially if you want to live there for some length of time and raise a family. There's a lot of stuff that makes that more difficult than, say, living in Detroit or in the Midwest. So I remember thinking about, there's not a lot of examples of people doing that, working outside of a studio, because they want you, understandably, for two reasons in the studio: for secrecy, as well as the synergy that happens being in a building with someone else, the serendipitous creativity that happens when you're, grabbing a snack from the snack bar and you talk to another developer and you're like, hey, what about that one thing? Oh yeah, we did this, that's great. So there's more opportunities for that in a studio. So I get it. But what this, I hope, this time is doing is it's showing that creativity can be accomplished, secrecy can be maintained, and good work can be done remotely. And that's what's happening. Now there's bumps, it's not just this big dream. I think, productivity, it's hard to gauge what it would be like compared to being in the studio. But the good news is that everyone's getting a taste of this. It might go completely badly, but I don't get a sense that it is, because it's a necessity here now. And tools are being developed to help people work remotely, and they've been developed, but now they're like all of a sudden got main focus, right? And everyone's working really hard to make these systems as awesome as possible. So I think from this time, we'll see that you're less tied geographically to your career. And that's my hope.
What can a recently graduated student do with a degree in animation, or like what should they expect coming out of college with a degree in animation?
Probably a lot of rejection. I know I had a lot of rejection. I mentioned that already. But what they should expect also is there will be opportunities, like what I mentioned, opportunities to get in the industry, and beyond that. That's just how I got in. I mean, there's plenty of ways to get in. I know a lot of people also go the route of quality assurance, QA. Expect, you'll have to probably be patient. You'll have to be tenacious. You gotta be passionate. But that all pays off. I mean, for me, it did. It took a long time though, but that's what was necessary. But then also expect a lot of excitement, right? I mean, those first opportunities are so exciting. And, especially if you're young out of college and you don't have a family yet, there's an opportunity for you to pour yourself into the work, to stay late because you want to, hopefully, and really try and show people what you got. And so proving yourself is another thing you can expect is that desire to prove yourself. And sometimes, that can be frustrating, but it's good to have that mentality and to put your best foot forward in that regard. But you're riding a high of excitement. I mean, you reach something that you've been working hard for, and enjoy it. Just enjoy it as much as you can, because there's a lot to be enjoyed.
What sort of skills do animators need other than the technical skills?
Yeah, okay. So obvious ones are ability to draw. And I know a number of animators who don't draw, but I have found value in it just from allowing me to sketch out ideas. So even like first person weapons, my workflow is I would often do, reference on the internet of actual military shooting weapons and manipulating weapons. That's super key. But we have a bunch of airsoft weapons, metal airsoft weapons at the studio. What I would do is I would take a GoPro and I would hold it in my mouth facing this way, and I would play with the gun and take reference. But the drawing came in when I would scrub through and see what my keyframes were. Like, okay, that's a cool pose, and I would sketch them down, and then I would create sketches of my key poses that way. And for me, in my process, it was super valuable because I was making note. It's a good exercise to make note of the things that inspired me in the reference. What was it about that I liked? And then I would march through blocking things out with that at my side. It also helps in communicating ideas that you want to try and implement. With a new innovative feature and you want to sort of describe it. There's whiteboards everywhere at Trinity Work. In fact, the whole walls are whiteboards. So you're always drawing, and you need to be able to communicate. It's just sketching. It doesn't have to be this gorgeous drawing, but you need to be able to understand perspective and form and anatomy so that you can communicate your ideas at least. So drawing is an obvious one, but I'm here to say I agree with that. Old hat knowledge of animation, even if you're in stop motion or in 3D animation. An eye for cinematography and composition is key, especially if you're in cinematics. Knowing how to lead a viewer's eye around a scene and directing them around the frame with your motion and making sure your animation reads. Oh my God, is this important? Especially in games where if a player misses a detail, they may be lost for an hour. So you need to really make sure you're clearly communicating that we're always asking, does this read? Does this little thing read? That's a big question. So composition and cinematography comes in handy because we're animating cameras all the time too. Even if it's not a cinematic, it could be a little vignette, and we need to animate the camera. So that helps. Patience and focus is important because this is tedious work. So you need to be okay with hearing a line of dialogue over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and not bugging the hell out of you. You need to be curious about movement and life. Like if you like sitting and people watching and like what makes how the person's shifting their weight, you need to be very observant and drawn to observing that stuff and being able to break down what's going on with the mechanics of someone's body. And be a lifelong learner. Like I said, you're never done growing. You always look at your stuff and go, oh gosh, it could be better. And that's also a good, so critical eye, being able to see your stuff and go, well, you want to like what you do. And often I do, I'm happy with what I turn out with, but sometimes you go back and you go, oh, okay, that could be better. And that's good. That's a good thing, to be able to recognize that, and not to be down on yourself. This stuff's hard work. And what you might look as something that looks horrible, that you might feel that way, another person can go, oh, that's amazing, I love it. And so people never really know what's in your head. They only know what you put on the screen. So that's a nice piece of advice, is you may have wanted it to be here, but it only was here and people go, wow, how'd you get it there? That's amazing. So there's some peace of mind in that. You know, the other thing that's good to have as an animator too is a sense of rhythm and timing. That's something that's been hard for me. Oftentimes in animation, you'll see, especially in student work, it sort of hits beats evenly. And we don't know why, but it feels a little bit boring. When something has a bit of a texture or a rhythm to it, it's like da-da-da-da. There's an appeal to that speaks to an audience, that keeps them engaged. And this was hard for me. And I think people who are musicians or drummers, they're going to have a better time if they, you know, just to be a musician is a lifelong learning thing. But if you're innately musical, it'll help you, I think, when it comes to blocking and timing your animation so that it has a sense of rhythm and appeal to it.
You said you used a GoPro, you put it in your mouth, and then you took one of the metal airsoft guns that's in your studio to play out on how you will utilize the gun. Did you do that for every gun that you want to create in Call of Duty?
Pretty much. Now, I think on Modern Warfare 3, I relied more on just seeing how military operators would manipulate the weapon, and I very much wanted to please our, you know, players that of the military background. We have a lot of people in the military that play these games, and so you want to make sure you're getting the operation right because they're the first to call you out on it. I did a lot of that, and that was my learning on how to, you know, about guns. I didn't know much about guns coming into Call of Duty. But then on Ghost, that's when I asked the studio for a GoPro, and we had a couple airsoft weapons we would mess with, but it was like an AR. But we also had an SMG. We also had an LMG we needed to do. We had a sniper rifle, and some of them were rubber, and some of them were plastic. And to get the weight right, you really need to spend about $400 and get one of these fully metal, hyper-realistic airsoft weapons. And so we ended up having a weapon wall, which I was very proud of because it was on Ghost, I believe. No, maybe it was Infinite Warfare where we really expanded that. But we ended up having quite an impressive weapon wall that was in my room. And it was really cool because people will come through and give tours to people. We had celebrities come through, athletes, and I was a stopping point on the tour because I had the weapon wall in my room. But then it eventually moved out of my office into another place. But yes, that was huge. So what I found was that when I put the GoPro, I would just bite on the clip that you would normally clip it into like a helmet. I had it upside down, and the chin is actually the perfect camera height for first-person weapons because we often bring the weapons up more into our frame of view, right? So I had it super wide setting, and this is like a GoPro 2 back in like 2012. It was very helpful for me. So like, I don't know if you played Ghosts.
Yes.
But like the honey badger, for instance, that was one of my favorite weapons to animate because
wow.
That little like sort of flip out I did, that was all I had. And in fact, I put this on my YouTube channel too. My actual first person reference of me manipulating an AR to get that sort of look. What's funny about that weapon, I like telling the story because I was super inspired on that weapon, and it shows. The name the honey badger, I instantly thought of that stupid video of the guy talking about the honey badger don't give a shit. I don't know if you guys seen that. Honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't give a shit.
Now watch this. Look, a snake's up in the tree. Honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't give a shit. It just takes what it wants.
Just being a badass. And so I wanted that attitude in the weapon. I'm like, I wonder if I can get that into this weapon. And just this, I don't give a shit attitude. And so the idea of flipping the clip out to the side like that was like, I don't care, get rid of it. And every movement I did with it was this like, treat it like a piece of, you know, trash, just really aggressive with it. And the more aggressive you are with these weapons, I think the more appealing they are.
You talked about the gun wall in your office. I had a question. What kind of environment do animators work in on average? Is that like an average thing to have a gun wall in your office?
Well, it can be. What's awesome about being an animator, and I can only really speak to being an animator in the game industry, but every studio I've worked at, which is mostly Infinity Ward, I've been at 2 different Infinity Ward offices, and then at Niantic and at Raven, you're surrounded by creative people who are super passionate. And that's key, right? We want people to feel comfortable expressing themselves, their personal reflection of who they are, and we want them to come up with unique ideas. And you really need a space that welcomes that environment. So, you know, there's no clothing restriction, there's no dress code, I guess I'm trying to say. But what's also awesome is that people are always bringing in things that inspire them. And so, like at Raven, I sit next to this animator who's got these incredible little maquettes and characters, all over his desk. And some people bring in all their toys from their childhood. We have life-size, statues of characters, and so it's really stimulating to be in an environment like that. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, I can have a wall of weapons in my office, and that's not something you see very often. And I love that about it. I love that about the job. It's just, you're not a banker. You come in and you get to work and try and make the most epic shit you can. And especially I've been lucky to work at these well-resourced bigger studios, and so it's really stupid. I mean, they've got like a snack bar that rivals 7-Eleven, and they've got, coffee machines, and they'll pay for your dinner, and they so often have a workout room or a game room.
I do have to ask this question though. Did you have a Ghostbuster statue on your desk?
That's a great question. I do now, but I didn't. I didn't have any Ghostbuster stuff. I had the Lego Ectomobile when I was the second part of my tenure at Infinity Ward, and now that I'm at Raven, they've gone more hog wild with like desk trinkets. And so just recently, well, no, actually at Infinity Ward, I did buy a proton gun that lights up and sounds like, because it was like the one weapon I really needed to have in my office, was a proton neutrino wand.
How competitive is the animation job market?
Very competitive. I think I mentioned earlier, it seems like everyone wants to be an animator, especially in feature film. I think in feature film particularly, we look at like a Pixar or a DreamWorks or a Disney, and the thought is, everything serves the animation, it seems. So everyone wants to work there. It's so hard to get in there. It can be done. I know people who've gotten in there who had a similar story to me, and they did it. But I found it very difficult. Gaming, again, I feel like the bar for entry was a little lower for animators in gaming, although I think it's changing. I think now, like we were talking about, we're seeing people gravitating more towards it because it's just looking more and more awesome. And then with game jobs too, I mentioned tests. They have you do tests. That's also unique, I think, to the gaming industry. I don't know if you have to do that for film or TV, but for games you do. Although I will say that's a good thing, because typically what you'll find is it really weeds people out, and it's a good opportunity for people getting into the industry, because I know that there's some old farts like myself who might look at a test and go, I'm not doing a test, or they might phone it in. But that's your chance to show your hunger and your drive and to kill it. Because I've been on the other side of things now, where I've hired a number of animators. I've been through a number of interviews. I've seen a number of tests, and I find the test is what separates the cream of the crop from the rest of it. Because even like we'll get amazing feature film reels. And my fear beginning in my career was, no one's gonna hire a game animator for a Pixar film. Well, I find it works the other way too. Like oftentimes our film animators will do a test for us, and it's rough. And it's like, whoa, what the heck? This is not at all like they're real. It's tough. They're tough tests. But if you're like, I really want this, it's your time to shine. And so that's what it was, I think, for me at Infinity Ward, because I think I had a pretty good test. I actually didn't get offered the job right away. I got out there for the interview, and I thought I had a great interview, and I was expecting to get a call later that day. And then a week later, I got an email saying, we went with someone else. Thanks anyhow. The 3 weeks go by, and then they called me and said, hey, that candidate went sideways. Things kind of flaked out. Are you still interested? So that's another thing to mention is, you want to be number one, but number two is not so bad sometimes. So tests are not so bad. Do them with all your vigor, and it could be what helps get you in.
So what inspires you personally when making animations?
Right, so it's super important to be inspired whenever you're creating an animation, because boy does it show in the end result. And I already talked about reference and how key that is for me. And, most of my experiences working in Call of Duty. So I'm always looking stuff up on YouTube to try and see if I can find out how something is properly worked, or if there's an example of a certain plane crash, or there's some of it. It can get a little morbid, maybe looking up the reference in that regard. But it's good to have that reference. You want to try and put into your mind as much examples of how things are or should be done. It's funny, you think about animating a weapon and reloading it. There's only so many ways you can do it. You think, And every game, we make 40 weapons have multiple reloads year after year. Of course, there's 3 studios doing it. It sometimes seems like it would be hard to stay inspired, but that's where I think if your love of the craft comes in handy, because I can get excited over a hand placement. If in my reload I go, oh, look how I grabbed the magazine there, and look at the rhythm of how I did that. Like, that gets me going, and all of a sudden that's the heart of the animation. That sort of ties it all together and makes it something special. And so I look for that kind of stuff. I would say, and I'm guessing, but I would think, same thing with if you're an acting animator, if you're an animator at Pixar and you've got to create an emotional moment, the more you can draw upon your own personal experiences, the more you're going to create something that not just looks cool, but connects with your audience. And that separates the animators, the good from the bad, is the ones who can not just technically create something that's good, but how are you emotionally connecting with this, even down to a weapon reload, up to something like, a very emotional moment from, Finding Dory, where she's crying about her childhood. I mean, you need to be able to draw upon some sort of personal experience. So, and you get that from all over the place. And depending on what your line of work is, you'll find your own avenues of inspiration. But yes, keep looking for that. For me, it's my own personal reference. It's looking up people operating these things in a professional capacity. But it might be something different for you, and it might be something silly, like maybe there's a cartoon that you watch that does this thing that you love, and you want to put that into your work. I mean, that's totally legitimate. Make it your own, and find a neat way to utilize that. Get your head out of the book, walk around, experience life, have relationships, get your heart broken. Do all that stuff. Don't just be behind a computer. You need to bring in your personal experience into your work.
That's positive. He said, "Get your heart broken." I'm with this one.
That might come back in some way later on in a cathartic, psychological way that's going to help you process it, and it's going to be beautiful art, man. It's hard to do that in a first-person shooter, maybe, but at the same time, no, right? Like I was talking about our military service men and women that play the game, and the things that they'll see in a weapon manipulation that they go, oh, they really did their research. That's exactly how we do it. I remember, we are blessed at Infinity Ward to have a lot of consultants that will come in who are Navy SEALs, and they'll come in and they'll play your game and they'll tell you what they think. And boy, those are opinions you definitely value. And luckily you get to hear them before you ship, so you can make a change on it. The first time on Modern Warfare 3, the first time I ever animated something that I felt really proud of was the P99 pistol. And it was just this reload I did where you had a mag in your hand and you grabbed the other one and then you inserted it and then put the magazine away. And it's probably been done before. It's not like it was so novel, but the guy who came in this guy has got a lot of experience, and he goes, that's exactly how I do it. That's exactly how I reload a pistol every time. And he was geeked, and I was like, all right, sweet, that's awesome. So I don't know where I was going with that, but inspiration, yeah. If you're lucky enough to have Navy SEALs give you some inspiration, that helps too on a first-person shooter.
Yeah. So, what advice can you give a student trying to make it into the gaming industry?
Mm-hmm. The biggest component I think a student can give themselves as a leg up is networking, and that's why I think I mentioned maybe I didn't. Having a good reel and being talented and proficient in what you do is absolutely important. You need that, but the connection, especially for a student, is almost more important, because the connection is going to get you in the door, and your talent's going to keep you in that door. So join as many groups as you can. Go to as many school functions and awesome game tournaments. as possible. Go to things like if you're into game design, if you're into games, definitely go to GDC. This requires some cash to get your butt out there. There are ways to volunteer. You can volunteer for these conferences and they'll pay for much of your way. Oh, absolutely look into that. Because not only will that get you there, you're going to be the guy people are going to at the studios that they're going to go, hey, I need your help. Get over here. What was your name? And you do a good job at that. And they'll remember you, that you can then go, hey, yeah, I remember I was a volunteer, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that guy was so on it and super ambitious, and or gal. I mean, that's an opportunity to meet people. That's what you want to do. You want to meet people, make the best impression as you can. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. There's multiple opportunities. Just keep yourself out there. Keep your work out there. Again, the world's different now. I think with YouTube, it's another way to sort of get your stuff seen. So create content, get the content out there, open to feedback, say thank you, no matter what that feedback is. Don't be afraid to be a thorn in people's side. I tell this all the time because I know I felt very timid reaching out to people who I thought were like, the cream of the crop. And I was so afraid of bugging them, or I applied somewhere and I don't want to be that guy who keeps asking, hey, did you see my stuff? Did you see my stuff? Do it. Because I know, being on that side of things, I always appreciated people's tenacity. It shows they really wanted it. And that's one major thing you're hiring for. Do these people really want it? How bad do you want it? Show me. And if they're willing to, every week even, you don't want to do it every day, obviously, but every week, just check in, say, hey, I'm just checking in. Want to know if you saw my stuff? Because oftentimes we're so busy, especially if we're animators trying to hire for a position, we forget it's not our best interest to get you hired. It's your best interest to get you hired. When someone writes me back and I've dropped the ball, I'm like, oh man, thanks. I'm so glad you reached out. Yeah, here's some comments on your demo reel you want feedback on. Don't hesitate, man. Put yourself out there. You're not going to bug anybody. And if you are, they'll tell you, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't. I hope I'm stressing that enough. Because being on that other side of the table, I can tell you it's appreciated. At least for me, it's appreciated when someone shows that, and can help me stay on course, because I got a lot going on. But there's more to it than that. So I want to mention conferences because these are key. SIGGRAPH is another one, especially when I was coming up in the world. Last time I went to SIGGRAPH, it felt a lot smaller. SIGGRAPH is a special interest group for graphics. At the time, that's when all the studios showed off their how they pulled off these amazing video animations. It's more film related, but all the head honchos were there, and there were parties to go to, and they were hard to get into. But you ran up against these folks, and you could meet connections. As an animator, no matter what industry you want to get into, the number one conference I recommend is CTN Expo. CTN X, I think they call it. It's every year, I think in November, in Burbank, in a hotel, or at least it used to be. And that was much more just focused on animation. And you had people like Glenn Keane, who's a Disney legend there. I got to meet him after he gave an awesome talk. Super inspirational, a lot more intimate. So those are the big three, CTN, GDC, and SIGGRAPH for animation. And locally, so one of the ways I got my start out of College of Creative Studies at Armstrong White is I joined a group called Seam Effects, Southeast Michigan Animation and Effects. I think they're still around. I met so many folks locally, and that led to my Armstrong White position. They were building a team of computer animators, and Scott Dunham, who ran that, knew me, and I was one of the guys he called. So you never know where the opportunities are going to come from. So my last bit of advice is have a dream, be super passionate, be on top of it like nothing else, but make sure your dream is not too narrow that you miss opportunities you wouldn't have thought of. And I think that's the point I was trying to make in my intro. Had I been so dogmatic about being an ILM animator, I don't know where I'd be today. I really don't. But I widened my view enough to catch some of these opportunities that then led me in places that I never would have expected. And I'm very proud of where I ended up. So have a dream. You really need to be passionate to put up with a lot of the difficulties of getting in the door, but keep that dream wide enough. I mean, if anyone's watching this, the number one advice to take away from my hope, and it sounds like you are, is definitely, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. It's so true. And pounding the pavement and being a bug in people's ears. You're right. It's against our nature to do that because it seems rude. But not when it comes to getting a job, especially in the creative industry, especially in games. From my experience, maybe it's everywhere. But we want passion, man. We want to see that passion. And that's a form of passion.
Yeah.
Is not taking no for an answer. Well, you got to take no. If they're saying no, obviously you got to walk away. But if you're waiting on them and they're just not getting any feedback, keep knocking on that door until they tell you no.
But yeah, that's pretty awesome though.
I think that's all the questions that we have.
I appreciate all the really intelligent questions and your deep knowledge of the franchise. You probably know more than I do, but it's awesome. It's been great chatting with you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I wish I could shake your hand, but
yeah, we wave.
We'll do it virtually.
Virtual handshake, yeah.